It's 1908. A young journalist with empty pockets walks into a mansion and sits across from the richest man in the United States, Andrew Carnegie. The tycoon leaned across the table with an unusual offer. He wanted the journalist to spend the next 2 decades interviewing 500 of the most successful people in the country to extract a repeatable formula for wealth. Carnegie offered him introductions and access, but refused to pay him a single dollar. Carnegie pulled out a stopwatch. He gave the young man exactly 60 seconds to decide. 29 seconds later, the journalist said yes, a decision that separated him from the 250 other candidates who had already declined. That journalist was Napoleon Hill. He spent 20 years compiling his research, finally publishing Think and Grow Rich in 1937. He released the book during the Great Depression, specifically designed to help a devastated population rebuild their lives. Hill organized the habits of these 500 millionaires into a highly specific mental blueprint. The goal was to provide a step-by-step method that would allow any individual to systematically change their financial results by changing their internal habits. The process begins with desire. Hill argues that achievement requires more than a passive wish. It requires a specific target attached to a hard deadline and a clear plan of action. Hill points to Edwin C. Barnes as the ultimate example. Barnes had no money and no connections, but he hopped a freight train to New Jersey with a singular obsession. He intended to become business partners with Thomas Edison. Barnes spent years sweeping floors in Edison's lab, waiting for an opportunity. When Edison's own sales team rejected a new dictating machine called the Ediphone, Barnes stepped in and sold it himself. He eventually secured the exact partnership he had envisioned years earlier. Hill calls this faith, the act of visualizing a goal so vividly that the mind begins to accept it as reality. In this framework, the brain does not distinguish between a real experience and one that is intensely and repeatedly imagined. To maintain this focus, Hill developed autosuggestion. This involves writing down a specific goal and reading it aloud twice a day. The intent is to force the goal past the conscious mind's skepticism and into the subconscious. When a specific target is paired with intense emotion, it functions as a command to the subconscious. The mind begins identifying opportunities and resources that would otherwise remain hidden to a passive observer. But mental programming alone is insufficient. While standard education focuses on general facts, Hill found that building wealth requires specialized knowledge, the ability to organize and apply information toward a definite end. Henry Ford famously demonstrated this in a courtroom. When lawyers tried to prove he was uneducated by asking him trivia questions, Ford replied that he didn't need to memorize facts. He had a row of buttons on his desk that could summon the specific expert he needed at any moment. Ford's success relied on specialized expertise and persistence. Hill warns that most people quit at the first sign of failure, illustrating this with the story of a gold miner who stopped digging just 3 feet from a major vein. To overcome these individual limitations, Hill advocates for the mastermind. This is the intentional coordination of multiple experts working in harmony toward a single purpose. Every major fortune Hill studied relied on this network. Franklin D. Roosevelt utilized the same principle during the Depression, surrounding himself with a specialized group of advisors that the public called his brain trust. Lasting wealth requires moving beyond individual intelligence. It is the result of executing specialized plans through the amplified power of a carefully selected network. Modern neuroscience explains this through the reticular activating system, a filter blocking millions of data points every second. When you focus on a desire, you tune this filter. Your brain begins to perceive the resources and opportunities required to achieve the goal. However, this filter can be corrupted by what Hill calls the 6 ghosts of fear. These internal doubts effectively hijack the mind's focus, causing it to prioritize potential hazards over opportunities. The fear of poverty and the fear of criticism are the most common barriers. They cause people to remain in stagnant situations because they are terrified of financial loss or the negative opinions of others. These fears are self-constructed illusions. Hill argues these mental barriers are built by the individual and can therefore be dismantled by the individual. Achievement is a manufactured state of mind. By committing to a single desire and neutralizing internal fears, you change the way your brain processes the world, allowing you to recognize and act on the opportunities required to win.